few times a year, I go train with some retired Navy SEALs. And this isn't about like really learning combat lessons or anything like that. It's more about learning the life lessons and learning life lessons from people who have really been that close to death is a really, really valuable thing. Because one, there's so much honesty in it, but two, there's so much truth in it. And one of the things that we did a couple times ago, me and 20 other guys go and do this. It's not something I do alone. We go and we train with these guys, and they were teaching us how to patrol. And again, they're just teaching us life lessons about our own lives as taught through the eyes of a SEAL, and they're teaching us how to patrol. And so they would go and you'd go walk in these really long lines. And there are 10 of us in a line, and you have a point man, you have a platoon leader, a bunch of people in the middle, then you have assistant platoon leader and rear security in the back. One of the things that they were teaching us about was what happens when you get enemy contact. If a bunch of SEALs are marching in a line, what happens when there's contact, meaning there's enemies coming up and they're shooting at you. And one of the most valuable lessons that I got that's really relevant to everything I do in business, which I'm going to segue into that here in a second, is they talk about if you're going to go on offense, if you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. Don't give anything a half measure. So good example of that when they're giving us this lesson on contact. So what would happen is that if you're walking in a line and let's say there's an enemy to your right, the first guy that notices the enemy over there would yell contact right, meaning, all right, we got an enemy over there. And then what happens? All 10 people in line, if we had real guns, we've got these like PVC pipes that are just shapes to help us understand what it would be like if we had them. But we all turn them that way, and it would be like 10 guns opening up, all shooting at the same time towards the area of contact. Now, you can imagine how terrifying this would be if you were one of the bad guys and you had 10 SEALs shooting at you with whatever guns they had. It would be a big thing. And they were talking to us about this, and they said, listen, man, what we do is so basic. It's so basic. We're not going to have 2 guys shooting at the bad guy. We're going to have 10 guys shooting at the bad guy because we want such an overwhelming force to come at them that there's no way they're going to back down. So the lesson, which I got to early, but I'll repeat it here again, is that if you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. So go on offense. Don't just sit there and say like, well, we're going to kind of sort of go on offense and we're going to go after stuff. Now, you might have been wondering this whole time, how am I going to relate this to business and the direction that you need to go? It's actually something that was really relevant to me. So I was working on this problem over the weekend. And if you ever have to take your own advice, you know that it sucks. Like, you know that it sucks to have to take your own advice. Your advice doesn't suck. It just sucks when you have to take your own advice. So I advise companies on how to generate thousands of leads. And what's interesting is that I am really, really clear when I look at another company about what they need to do to drive thousands and thousands of leads, but I don't always see it for myself. And I recognized that I needed to drive more leads. And for my business, I don't need thousands and thousands because it's a high ticket and I really can't. I fulfill on thousands and thousands of leads with what I'm doing in consulting. So I used to be able to do that when I was just doing coaching. Very different in terms of contracting, coaching, and consulting. I'll get into that in a different episode. But anyway, so I don't need thousands and thousands of leads, but I noticed that I do need more leads than I am currently driving right now. And so I started to look at my lead gen strategy. And then I started to think about this, is that people usually don't use all of the lead gen strategies that they could in order to get it. They look primarily at one way of doing it. And that way does or does not produce the number of leads that you want, but you don't think about all the other ones that are there. We look at one strategy, we say, okay, cool, that's it. Take it back to the SEAL lesson. That's like 1 or 2 guns shooting at a bad guy when every single gun has to shoot at a bad guy. Now, a majority of the businesses that I talk to when I'm interviewing them to see if there's somebody that I want to work with and that I can help, they use a word of mouth lead gen strategy. But really, if you ask them a couple questions, there really is no strategy behind that. There's no cadence to when they're asking. There's no specifics to who they're asking for or even who of their customer base they are asking. So word of mouth referral strategy really isn't a strategy. So what I want to do is I want to walk through 9 different ways to go through lead gen. And my encouragement for you is that you will use a majority of these, if not all of these, if you're looking to drive lots and lots of leads. Remember, if you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. So I'll start out with the ones that are probably the most top of mind because they're the most relevant in the way that we live our lives today. And so when we look at lead gen, we look at Facebook and Instagram. And I put those two together because it's really the same type of person, slightly older demographic on Facebook than there is on Instagram, but not by much. The way that people consume content on those isn't too much different, owned by the same company. So it's really the same type of thing. So we look at Facebook and Instagram as one way to generate leads. Second way they probably look to generate leads is on YouTube. So YouTube ads where you've got your first 5 seconds or first 20 seconds rather before you have to pay. So you think about that and you're like, okay, cool. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create video content. We could drive leads that way. Then there's PPC campaigns. Pay per click. That happens primarily on Google, though I think like Bing and Yahoo, I think there's some other search engines that will probably sell you pay per click traffic. Now that is going to elicit your fee per number of clicks that you get. Somebody searches a term. This works. Like this is kind of a longer game with this because most of it goes to SEO when it comes to native traffic and that sort of thing. But those are ways that you can generate leads. Those are the ones probably at the top of most minds, but in reality, there's quite a few more. And again, if we're going to be aggressive, like let's be aggressive. So let me go through some ways that are probably less conventional, but ways that I've still found to work for me in the past and for my clients. So the first way is sending targeted videos. This can be a very specific video to a very specific person. You can send this to them online or off. Let's say you're connected through LinkedIn. Let's say you're connected through Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're connected. You can send them a very targeted video that is specific to your prospect. You can do this offline as well. I've taken to sending little folders with pre-recorded videos inside of them to really, really high value prospects. Really expensive to send. That's why they got to go to high value prospects. But that elicits a personal response from the person that you're doing this. Second, third, the fourth thing now is something that is lost. Like we lost this a long time ago. And I think it's because people thought, oh, well, that's a lot of pick and shovel work. Plus it sucks. You don't want to do it, which is cold calls. Cold calls are one of the best ways to generate a high volume of leads, though you do need to make a lot of calls to do it if you want to generate a lot of leads because the take rate isn't big. Remember, you're going to get told no way more often than you're going to get told yes, but it's the yeses that actually count. Now, get it, cold calls are not easy. They're not glamorous, but they are something that has worked and will continue to work forever if you're trying to drive a lot of leads inside. So 2 other things. Direct mail. Sending actual letters to people. You just have to get their attention with it in a certain way. That might be sending it in, like I remember sending out letters in these gold tubes, like they were these cardboard tubes with gold foil on the outside because I wanted it to look different. If it just looked like a regular letter, the person probably wasn't going to open it. So I had to make it something interesting. So I did direct mail. Then there's also direct mail with like a twist. There's like a gift inside of this or something. So let's say that I know that my prospect is into surfing, which by the way, if you've got high value prospects, it's not that hard to figure out what they're into because they're sharing all of that stuff on social media. So let's say that I've got a high value prospect that's into surfing. Well, I could send him a direct letter with a surfboard or with a case of surf wax or whatever, something to get the attention beyond just the letter, even though the letter copy has to be good, but it shows that I've taken an interest in them. And there's this psychological principle that is about reciprocity. So if you give something to somebody, they psychologically have a need to give that back to you or give you something back to you in exchange for what you've done for them. This is the principle of buying somebody a drink. That means, well, let's have a conversation. If you accept the drink, you're kind of accepting the conversation at the same exact time. That's the deal with that. So you can do direct mail, but with a gift. Then also, I mentioned LinkedIn earlier, but LinkedIn is a forgotten space for a lot of people to try to drive leads. LinkedIn, especially for B2B leads, is a great spot. Whether you're doing native posts, whether you're doing paid advertisements on LinkedIn, that's an amazing way to do lead gen from a B2B space. Then something too, you're an expert. Like you listening to this, you're an expert in something. Not sure what you're an expert in, but you're an expert in something. What about getting a podcast booker? somebody that will book you onto other people's podcasts. That way, instead of trying to go get attention from your audience yourself, you go to somebody who's already got the attention of your audience and you go through them. It's a massive, massive way. This is something that I've got to do a lot more of. And I'm telling you guys this as much for you as I'm telling it for me to remind myself of, if you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. Final thing. This is the ninth thing. Ninth thing in terms of driving leads that really I hope you use all of these. And it is referrals, but it's referrals in a different way. Like the whole word of mouth referral strategy where there isn't really a strategy, like that's got to go away. You have to actually have a strategy. So there has to be a when you ask, how you ask, and what you ask for. If you've got those things down, then you actually have a strategy. There's a cadence to it. There is, this is when I'm going to ask. Primarily, you would want to ask after your client received a big win. Say like, hey, listen, you just got this big win. Do you have anybody else that would feel like they needed a win like that? And that's easier. How you ask, right? How is it that you are going to ask them to do this? Are you going to do it in person? Are you going to do it over the phone? Are you going to do it in an email? Are you going to do it in a letter? Like, how are you going to do it? And what are you going to ask for? Most of the time, the challenge with referral-based lead gen strategies is that you're asking the person to refer everybody rather than a very targeted person. So let's say that there's a targeted person or a targeted company that you want to work with. Asking your clients that are already happy with what you're doing for an introduction to that specific person is going to help you make a connection to that specific person much easier than do you know anybody? Because now I got to think of everybody that I know. Then I've got to narrow it down to people that may be a fit for the person asking me for a referral. And then I've got to narrow that down to the people who need something right now. So it makes it really, really hard on your client to give you a referral if you're asking this open-ended thing. So there's 9 different ways to generate leads for your business, online, offline. All of those things are ways that have proven to drive hundreds or thousands of leads every single month. And yeah, they take a lot of effort. They do. But if having a massively successful company where you get to pick the clients that work with you versus taking money from anybody who decides to give it to you, then you're going to need to put in the work to do it. I hope that you will implement all of these things. But if you're only implementing one, that's death's door. You got to be implementing at least half of what I talked about in this today, however you choose to do it, and more leads are coming your way. Oh, almost forgot. If you like this episode, then what I want you to do next is subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon. 3 new videos come out every single week, and I don't want you to miss any of them because the next one might just be the one that you really, really needed to hear. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next video.